The envoy arrived in silence, escorted by 2 shimmering sentinel drones. Its figure was tall, draped in glistening robes that didn't belong on Karen IV's ashen soil. The alien's skin shimmered like oil under harsh UV rays, its 4 eyes scanning the scarred walls of Fort Resolve with thinly veiled contempt. Captain Eric Draven stood at the edge of the courtyard, arms folded, jaw set like carved stone. Around him, soldiers lined the battlements, rifles idle but eyes alert. The alien stepped forward and projected a holographic seal into the air, a rotating emblem of the Galactic Council, its rings pulsating with gold light. "I am Envoy 73D of High Minister Korvax." The voice was melodic, artificially enhanced to carry across the courtyard. "Per Galactic Directive 41 Alpha, issued post-Terran dissolution, all human colonies shall render tribute." No one moved. Tribute shall include 100 biological units aged 2 to 10. A pause, as if even the AI hesitated, for assimilation. 1 Traton of processed ore. 1 full data vault of pre-council human technology. Failure to comply will result in planetary sterilization. A low murmur rippled through the crowd, nothing loud, nothing panicked. Just anger quietly bubbling under iron discipline. Draven stepped forward. "Your kind destroyed Earth. You glassed continents, erased cities, and called it peace." The envoy blinked slowly. "The Council regrets your emotional interpretation of historic events. Compliance ensures your survival. Resistance ensures extinction." A pause. Draven studied the alien. "You don't know what we've become, do you?" "Irrelevant," the envoy said. "You have 6 days to comply. This message will repeat." The hiss of steel cut it off. A blade, thrown from the shadows, embedded deep into the envoy's skull. Its body collapsed mid-sentence, metal staff clanging to the dirt. Draven didn't flinch. He turned to his second-in-command, Commander Lyra Vogt, tall, grizzled, and never far from a detonator. "Prep containment," he said. "We're sending them a message." Vogt smirked. "Just the head, or do you want to wrap it nicely?" "Just the head," Draven said. "And burn the robes. We're not dressing up for our executioners." The War Council met in the old reactor chamber, now a command center. Screens buzzed with low-orbit telemetry. No ships yet. But they'd come. "They won't wait 6 days," said Zaki, the engineer. "They'll come soon and they'll come heavy." "They expect fear," Lyra added. "But they've never fought us here." Draven leaned over the table. "No escape pods. No reinforcements. Just us and what we've built." Silence followed. "They want children," muttered Doc Reyes. "How do you even respond to that without burning everything down?" "With a clear message," Draven said. He activated the old projector. A 3D schematic of Fort Resolve rose. Walls layered with plasma shielding, railgun emplacements, buried gravity snares. Every part of the fortress was a kill zone. "This is what they want to break," Draven said. "They believe humans are scattered, docile. They don't remember what happens when we fight for our future." "They'll remember," Vogt said. "They'll bleed to remember," Reyes added. The next morning, they loaded the envoy's head into a titanium crate, still dripping black ichor. The message was short. Cut into alloy with a plasma torch. "This is our tribute. Earth isn't dead. We're just sharpening our knives." The crate was fired into orbit on a makeshift courier drone, fast enough to escape, slow enough to be intercepted. They made sure the Council saw it. Then, the waiting began. That night, Draven walked the inner perimeter. Children slept in underground bunkers. Families whispered beneath generator hums. The air stank of sulfur and old oil. He found Vogt on the tower, gazing at the stars. "Still think we've got a chance?" she asked. Draven exhaled through his nose. "I don't believe in chances. Just outcomes." She smiled faintly. Still stoic. Even after declaring war. Draven's eyes narrowed at the sky. "They think we're broken because we lost Earth. But we didn't die. We adapted. Became something they don't recognize." "They think we're afraid," Vogt said. Draven shook his head. No. They hope we are. Because if we're not. He left it hanging. Above them, a star winked out, blotted by the arrival of something vast. The first of the council ships had arrived. The morning fog had barely lifted from the crags of Cairn IV when the first rumble shook the ground beneath Fort Resolve. The council fleet, silent and ominous, had dropped from the edge of the system like a gathering storm, cutting through space with the precision of a sharpened blade. Massive warships, their sleek hulls gleaming with polished arrogance, descended toward the planet. Draven stood on the battlement again, staring up at the sky. The black behemoths were still miles out, but he could see their size now, huge and oppressive, like dark clouds just before the storm hit. They think we'll break, Vogt said, standing beside him, her rifle slung over her shoulder. I almost feel sorry for them. Don't, Draven replied, voice steady. They don't understand what they're up against. They're about to. Below, the fort was alive with activity. Soldiers moved with practiced urgency, securing positions and checking weapons. Engineers were running diagnostics on the planet's last-ditch defenses, kinetic railguns, ion disruptors, and gravity mines hidden beneath layers of hardened volcanic rock. Zaki, the chief engineer, watched a monitor flicker. Shield integrity's holding, he reported. The Council's ships won't be able to get through the outer layers without heavy damage. We've got one shot, Draven said, the gravity of the moment settling over him. If they land, there's no retreat. No surrender. Zaki's eyes were sharp. Understood. We've fortified every weak point. If they want to land, they'll have to get through us first. The first orbital bombardment came without warning. Explosive blasts ripped through the air, hurling plumes of dirt and debris into the sky. The fort trembled under the onslaught, but the shields held, flickering but intact. Brace for impact, Draven shouted, his voice carrying over the chaos. Hold your positions. The shock waves from the bombardment knocked several soldiers off their feet. But they didn't falter. They scrambled back into place, adjusting their sights, checking their gear. This was their world. This was their fight. The enemy ships didn't waste time. The first dropships descended, heavily armored, gliding through the dust and smoke like a predator circling its prey. Their engines screamed through the air, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built. Targeting system locked, Lyra's voice crackled through Draven's comm. They're landing near the southern ridge. We can hit them before they deploy ground forces. Do it, Draven said, his eyes never leaving the sky. We don't have time to waste. The first shot rang out, the hum of the railgun charged with violent intent. The shell tore through the atmosphere, carving a path of destruction. It hit the lead dropship dead center, the kinetic energy slamming into the craft with the force of a small asteroid. The ship crumpled, disintegrating in a burst of fire and twisted metal. Draven's heart skipped a beat, but his expression remained unreadable. One down. Keep firing. More shells followed, striking the descending ships with brutal precision. Explosions lit the sky as the enemy fleet staggered under the barrage. But they were not unprepared. The dropships retaliated, opening fire with energy blasts that sizzled through the air, leaving trails of burning heat in their wake. We're getting their attention, Lyra said, a grin in her voice. And they don't like it. Draven's lips twitched, but he remained focused. It's just the beginning. On the ground, chaos erupted as the Council's ground forces began to disembark. Alien soldiers, tall and armored in iridescent plates, spilled out of the wrecked ships, their weapons glowing with otherworldly power. They moved with the disciplined precision of soldiers trained for battle, their eyes scanning for targets. The humans were ready. A roar of gunfire shattered the stillness as soldiers opened fire, sending bursts of lead and plasma into the advancing enemy ranks. The first wave of aliens fell, their bodies collapsing in strange angles, but more came. They just kept coming, each one more relentless than the last. Don't let them pass. Draven barked into his comm, use the terrain, hit them from above. His voice was like a command, the human instinct to survive kicking in with deadly efficiency. Soldiers ducked behind boulders, set traps, and fired from hidden positions. They weren't just fighting for survival, they were fighting for something deeper, something more visceral, vengeance for Earth. The battle raged for hours. The Council's forces adapted quickly, sending in heavier units, armored titans that towered over human soldiers. The ground trembled with every step they took, each one more terrifying than the last. But Fort Resolve had teeth. Hidden anti-tank mines exploded beneath the titans, toppling their massive frames, sending alien soldiers scattering. And the railguns, always a step ahead, shredded anything that came too close. "Keep up the pressure," Draven shouted. "We're not letting them dig in." Lyra's voice crackled again. "They're reinforcing, more dropships inbound. We've got maybe 10 minutes before they deploy their heavy artillery." "Good," Draven said, his eyes narrowing. "That's all we need." He turned to Zaki, who was monitoring the outer defenses. "How long until we can launch the counterattack?" 5 minutes. "We've got a mobile unit ready, snipers, explosives, and enough firepower to punch through their flanks," Zaki replied, his fingers dancing over the control panel. Draven nodded. "Then let's give them hell." As the last of the Council's dropships hit the ground, the human forces surged forward, emerging from their camouflaged positions like shadows. Snipers picked off high-ranking officers, while squads planted explosives on the alien artillery pieces. The Council forces were caught off guard, unable to coordinate against the relentless barrage of human precision. "We're holding them off," Lyra said, her voice almost triumphant. "They didn't expect this." "They didn't expect us," Draven said, a grim smile crossing his face. "Keep pushing. We're not done yet." The battle continued, but the tide had turned. The Council fleet, once so confident, was now scattered and disarrayed. Draven watched from the tower as dropships began to retreat, their formations breaking apart. But they were not giving up. Not yet. "This isn't over," Draven said, his voice low. "They'll send more." "We'll be ready," Vogt replied, her voice calm but fierce. Draven's gaze never wavered. "We'll remind them what it means to underestimate humanity." Above, the sky darkened as more ships gathered, ready to descend upon the planet once more. But for now, the fight was theirs. The ground still trembled beneath their feet as the remnants of the first assault pulled back. But Draven knew better than to believe the fight was over. Above, the Council ships loomed, waiting for the next strike. Their numbers had dwindled, but the enemy's pride was as vast as the stars themselves. They wouldn't give up easily. They never did. Draven paced the command center, his eyes flicking between the maps and the faces of his officers. The room smelled of sweat and oil, the hum of the generators almost a constant companion. They had taken down a significant number of the enemy's ground forces, but the Council still had the advantage. Their orbital fleet remained unscathed, and that was something the humans could not afford to ignore. "Report," Draven barked. Zaki glanced up from his terminal. "We've got several heavy units inbound from the east. They've adapted fast. I don't think they expected us to hold out this long." Lyra leaned over Zaki's shoulder, her eyes narrowed in thought. "It's not just about holding out anymore. We've punched a hole in their armor, but if we don't keep the pressure on, they'll regroup and come at us harder." Draven nodded. "We're not waiting for them to regroup." Outside, the sun was beginning to set, casting an orange-red glow over the war-torn landscape. The sky was a battleground in itself, dotted with the remnants of wrecked ships, the burning wreckage of dropships that had failed to make it past their defenses. The planet's surface, however, told a different story, a tale of scorched earth and shattered stone. "Team 1 is ready to deploy," Lyra said, turning back to Draven. She was calm, too calm for the chaos that raged outside. It was a quality Draven admired, her ability to stay level-headed under fire. "We can't hold back," Draven replied. "We take the fight to them." Now, the human assault teams moved like ghosts through the ruins, their black uniforms blending with the shadows of the planet. The night had fallen quickly, but the dim red light from the setting sun illuminated their path. They were close, too close to the remaining Council forces who had regrouped near an abandoned military base just outside the city's cratered perimeter. Draven's team moved forward under the cover of heavy fire from the railgun batteries. The shock waves from the detonations sent tremors through the ground, but the soldiers pushed forward. Each step took them deeper into enemy territory. "Their artillery's up ahead," Vok's voice crackled in Draven's earpiece. "Looks like they're setting up for a full bombardment." Draven's jaw tightened. He could feel the heat of the battle even now, the pressure building with each moment. "Not on my watch," he muttered. "Take it out." The squad moved swiftly through the shadows, passing through a series of jagged hills and sparse vegetation. The moon was their ally now, the light just enough to guide them without revealing their positions. Minutes later, they reached the target. The alien artillery emplacements were massive, sleek structures of dark metal, humming with power. They stood like sentinels, waiting for their chance to turn the tide of the battle. The enemy had placed them well, but they had underestimated the humans' resourcefulness. "Explosives primed," Vok whispered, crouching beside a massive cannon. "Ready when you are." Draven's eyes scanned the surroundings. The enemy was still gathering forces, unaware of their presence. It was now or never. "Set the charges. Then we fall back," Draven ordered. His voice was calm but full of authority. The success of the mission hinged on precision, not haste. Vok and the others worked quickly, their movements efficient, trained. The charges were placed, and a moment later, the detonator clicked in Draven's hand. He gave the signal. The world erupted. The ground shook violently as the explosives tore through the alien artillery positions, sending shrapnel and debris into the air. The shockwave was deafening, but it was exactly what Draven needed. It scattered the enemy's forces, leaving them exposed and vulnerable. "Fall back. Now!" Draven commanded, as the echoes of the explosion began to fade. They moved quickly, retracing their steps through the treacherous terrain, staying low to avoid any retaliation. Behind them, the flames of the destroyed artillery raged, lighting up the night sky. When they returned to the perimeter of Fort Resolve, the soldiers gathered in silence. The mission had been successful, but it came at a cost. The sound of distant artillery fire still echoed, a constant reminder that the fight was far from over. Draven walked among them, checking on the wounded, offering silent words of encouragement. The humans had proven they could strike back with a vengeance, but they were still outnumbered, still outgunned. "We've given them a taste of what we can do," Draven said, his voice steady. "But we're not done yet. Not until every last one of them is off our planet." Lyra nodded. "And they'll come for us again. They're too arrogant to stop now." "They'll regret that," Draven replied, his eyes hardening. "We're going to make them regret it every time they think about Earth. And every time they think about humans." As the hours passed, the tension grew thicker. The sound of alien ships approaching once again vibrated through the air. The Council had regrouped, and now they were preparing for a final assault. The night was almost over, and with it, the battle that had started as a small rebellion against the Council's tyranny was about to escalate into something much larger, something that would change the fate of the galaxy forever. Draven stood on the command tower, staring at the horizon. In the distance, the flicker of ship engines and the glint of weaponry in space became more pronounced. But this time, he wasn't afraid. This time, they had them on the run. "We'll make our stand here," Draven said, his voice cold with resolve. "And we'll make them bleed for every inch they try to take." The human forces were ready. The Council fleet, no matter how vast, would find that the fight for Karen, 4 would be their last. The quiet before dawn was deceptive. The storm was already building above, both in the heavens and on the ground. Draven stood at the center of Fort Resolve's command post, his hands gripping the cold steel railing. His eyes scanned the horizon, watching as the last remnants of the night were swallowed by the rising sun. But it wasn't the sunrise he was focused on, it was the fleet gathering in orbit. The Council was readying their final assault. "We've only got one chance to stop them," Lyra's voice crackled over the comm. "Their ships are coming in fast. If we don't do something drastic now, it'll be over." Draven exhaled sharply, his thoughts racing. The human forces had fought like devils, but even they could only hold back the tide for so long. The Council's fleet had grown in strength, and this time, it wasn't just about artillery or tactic. The enemy had something worse: reinforcement. A new wave of warships, bristling with weapons that outmatched anything humanity had left. "We're not giving up," Draven said quietly, though the words tasted like steel in his mouth. "Prepare for the worst. Everyone is to fall back to the primary defense lines. We're going to give them hell." The soldiers were already moving. There was no hesitation in their steps, no doubt in their eyes. They knew what was at stake. This wasn't just about the survival of a fort. It was about the survival of humanity. The ground forces were already beginning to converge on the final choke point. They'd fortified every weak point, set traps, and readied themselves for the inevitable onslaught. But Draven knew it wouldn't be enough. No matter how well they prepared, they were still vastly outnumbered. The only way out of this was to hit the Council fleet where it hurt most, at the heart. Inside the command center, Zaki worked furiously at his console. Sweat dripped down his brow as he entered commands into the system. "Draven, I've got an idea. It's crazy, but it might just work. We can overload the last of our planetary defenses and send everything we have at their flagship. If we do it right, we might be able to take it down, but it's a one-way ticket." Draven turned, meeting Zaki's determined gaze. "You're saying we sacrifice everything for a shot at their flagship?" "It's the only way," Zaki replied. "We're running out of options. If we don't make the first strike count, they'll destroy us before we even get close. We've got a small window, less than 5 minutes. If we miss it—" "I know," Draven interrupted, his voice cutting through the tension. "Get it ready." As Zaki set the system in motion, Draven stepped outside, his boots crunching against the gravel of the courtyard. The early light of the sun glinted off the battered vehicles and weaponry. Soldiers were already taking their positions, their faces grim but resolute. There was no fear in their eyes, only determination. Vogt, standing by the perimeter, looked up as Draven approached. "We've got incoming," she said, her voice tight with urgency. "A whole new wave. They're coming for us with everything they have." "I know," Draven replied. He didn't need to say more. They both understood the stakes. The final wave had arrived. The sound of engines rumbled in the distance. The enemy's assault forces were moving in, the first wave of dropships already visible against the rising sun. The sky above was a deadly arena, filled with ships and weapons that could annihilate everything below in a matter of moments. "Time's up," Draven said under his breath. He turned toward the command center. "Prepare the charge. We're going to hit them with everything we've got." Back inside, Zaki gave the signal. "Ready. Systems are primed. All we need now is the right moment." Draven nodded. "Then we make our own moment." Outside, the first dropships began to fall from the sky, their engines screaming as they hurtled toward the surface. The first wave of enemy soldiers deployed, forming tight ranks as they began advancing toward the human lines. Draven could see them clearly now, tall, armored, and deadly. They were organized, disciplined, and relentless, but they weren't prepared for the kind of fight humanity was capable of. The first railgun salvo struck, and the battle was on. The humans fought with everything they had: plasma rifles, explosive charges, and anti-tank mines. Every weapon was aimed at the advancing enemy, each shot an act of defiance. The Council forces returned fire, their energy weapons lighting up the landscape, cutting down anything in their path. Draven stood at the front, moving with lethal precision. His rifle was steady in his hands as he picked off enemy commanders and squads, his every shot a statement. But the fight was not just about tactics. It was about survival. "Stay close," Draven shouted to his team, his voice lost in the cacophony of explosions. "We push them back, no matter the cost." Vogt, following close behind, returned fire with a fury, her rifle booming with each shot. "We're not letting them take this from us," she called out. The first wave of enemy soldiers fell, their bodies littering the battlefield, but the reinforcements were already coming. Dropships filled the sky, releasing more soldiers, more machines, and more weapons. They kept coming, wave after wave, pushing humanity back. Draven gritted his teeth. "Zaki, now!" In the command center, Zaki slammed the button that would activate the planetary defense system. The ground shook as massive weapons embedded deep within the planet's crust powered up. For a brief moment, there was a pause, a stillness in the air. Then the Earth screamed. A massive beam of energy shot up from the surface, piercing the sky with blinding intensity. The force of it tore through the atmosphere, creating a shock wave that knocked the nearest ships off course. The beam collided with the flagship of the Council fleet, its massive hull groaning under the pressure. The resulting explosion was cataclysmic, flames and debris raining down from the sky as the flagship was obliterated in an instant. Draven watched as the colossal warship broke apart, its debris scattering in every direction. The enemy fleet, already reeling from the unexpected attack, began to falter. But it wasn't over yet. The remaining ships were regrouping, trying to reorganize their forces. The battle was far from won. "We've got them on the ropes," Lyra's voice came through the comm, "but they're not done. We need to finish them off." Draven turned, his face a mask of determination. "Then we finish it. We push them until there's nothing left." The human forces, bloodied and battered, surged forward again, their last reserves of energy fueling them. The war was far from over, but today at least they had made their mark. And they were not going to stop. Not until the Council understood exactly what it meant to face humanity. The sky above Karen 4 was no longer the crisp blue it had once been. Now it was thick with the plumes of smoke and the glint of debris, an inferno of war. The once quiet world was now scarred, a battlefield soaked in the blood of both sides. But Draven stood firm, his feet planted on the cracked ground as he surveyed the wreckage. It was his people's victory, but the cost was staggering. "Sir," Lyra's voice broke through his thoughts. He turned to find her standing beside him, her face smeared with dirt and blood. Her eyes were tired, but there was a flicker of pride in them. "We did it. We drove them back." Draven nodded, but his gaze never wavered from the horizon. The Council's ships were still visible, retreating in disarray, their once mighty formations breaking apart. The flagship had been destroyed, but the damage was done. Thousands of lives had been lost in the chaos, and the final price of their victory weighed heavily on him. "We did, but at what cost?" Draven muttered under his breath, his voice hoarse from hours of shouting orders and fighting alongside his men. "Our people are scattered. We've taken a heavy toll. We can't just celebrate yet. The Council will be back with more force." Lyra frowned. "They won't come back as the same force. We've crippled their command structure. Their fleet's in tatters." "I know," Draven said, clenching his fists. "But it doesn't change the fact that we've lost too much. Too many good people." In the command center, the mood was a strange mixture of triumph and mourning. The soldiers were celebrating their hard-earned victory, but the command staff worked relentlessly. Zaki's eyes were bloodshot as he reviewed the battle reports, trying to make sense of what they had just survived. "Draven," Zaki called out, "you need to see this." His voice was thin, tight with exhaustion. Draven walked over, his boots echoing in the tense room. On the large display screen, Zaki had pulled up data from their sensors. The alien fleet was retreating, but not in the way they had hoped. The Council's remnants were regrouping, moving toward the edge of the system. "They're pulling back," Draven said. "Trying to regroup and rearm. They'll be ready to strike again soon." "Not quite," Zaki replied, pointing at the screen. They're not pulling back because they want to. Their forces are scattered, disorganized. We've made it impossible for them to recover. They can't maintain their full force. Their command has fractured. Draven studied the display, his mind racing. So, what does that mean for us? It means they'll limp home, lick their wounds, Zaki said, a rare, weary grin breaking out across his face. We've bought ourselves time. Time to rebuild. Time to strategize. Outside, the battlefront was quiet for now, the lull hanging heavy in the air. The smoldering remains of destroyed war machines and enemy transports littered the field. The soldiers, bloodied and bruised, began to regroup, tending to the wounded and gathering what was left of their equipment. They were all survivors, and the fact that they were standing here, against all odds, was a testament to the human spirit. Draven stepped out into the open, taking a deep breath of the scorched air. His gaze swept across the battlefield. He could see the bodies, human and alien alike, scattered across the dirt, some too broken to be identified. They were the cost of this victory. And it haunted him, gnawing at the edges of his consciousness. "Sir," Vox said, approaching him. Her voice was low, respectful. "We've heard word from the other bases. The Council's retreat is being broadcast. The galaxy will know what happened here. They'll know the human forces held their ground. This isn't just a victory for us, it's a statement." Draven looked at her, the weight of her words sinking in. A statement? Maybe. But what does it matter when so many have fallen? So many of our people. Vogt paused, then shook her head. What matters is that we showed them. We showed them that Earth isn't just some backwater world. That humanity won't bend. No matter what they throw at us. This fight, right here, has changed everything. They'll think twice before underestimating us again. Draven clenched his jaw. And we'll keep fighting. For those we lost, and for those still left to defend. Hours later, Draven sat alone in the command center, staring at the display. The final transmission from the Council fleet had been received. It was a coded message, but the words were clear enough. Failure. Return to base. The Council had been forced to retreat. But the fight was far from over. Draven knew it. The universe was watching, and it wasn't just the Council they had to worry about. Other factions, other empires, would surely take this moment of weakness as an opportunity to strike. Humanity had shown strength today, but it was only a small step on a long road. The door to the command center slid open, and Lyra walked in. She placed a datapad in front of him, her eyes tired but filled with purpose. "Intel reports. The galaxy is in shock," she said, her voice low. "Word of our victory is spreading fast. But the Council's defeat won't be the end of this war. It'll be the beginning of something bigger. We've put a target on Earth's back." Draven glanced at the datapad. His eyes scanned the first few lines of the report, which detailed the immediate aftermath of the battle. The Council was in disarray, but there was no telling how long their retreat would last. The galaxy would not forget the defiance shown here today. And the cost would be paid in blood. "I don't care what they throw at us," Draven said, his voice a low growl. "We'll hold. We'll fight. And we'll make them regret ever thinking they could conquer Earth." Lyra studied him for a moment, then nodded. "You're right. We've got the strength of humanity behind us. We're not going anywhere." Later that night, as the last embers of the battle faded into the horizon, Draven stood alone on a hill, gazing at the stars. The night had always been his companion, a place of quiet reflection after the chaos of battle. But tonight the stars felt different. They weren't just distant pinpricks of light. They were the next frontier, the vast expanse waiting for humanity to carve its mark. The Council may have retreated, but the war was far from over. And Draven knew one thing for certain: they wouldn't stop until they had secured their place among the stars. Humanity's fight had only just begun.